Movement. Hi, this is lecture 17, Analyze the Shift from Romantic to Impressionist Art in the 19th Century. We're going to talk about the Romantic movement, nationalism in the Romantic movement, literature in the Romantic movement, and composers in the Romantic movement. Then we'll talk about Realism, which is the next art movement after Romanticism, its connection to the Industrial Revolution, literature that's realist, and then photography. And then photography leads us into Impressionism, and the three Impressionist painters we're going to talk about today is Manet, Monet, and Degas. The Romantic movement. What you have to understand about Romanticism is that it emphasizes emotions. It loves the supernatural. They're very, very in love with nature. They glorify the individual heroes, and they cherished folk traditions, and they're also very nationalistic. And I think the book that best exemplifies this is the 19th century German book, The Complete Brothers Grimm Fairy Tales. You can see here on the cover, Hansel and Gretel. This emphasizes the emotions of fear. This emphasizes the emotions of love, of family, how Hansel and Gretel defeat the supernatural witch. The witch is in nature, and they love nature. They were just walking through the woods. It glorifies Hansel and Gretel because they're the heroes who can defeat the witch. And it cherished the folk traditions because Hansel and Gretel was actually a folk story. And it was also nationalistic. It was brought a lot of pride to their country because this was an old German story. Other examples that are in the fairy tales are Sleeping Beauty and Cinderella, Beauty and the Beast. So you have a lot of connections between our world and the Romantic movement of the 19th century. Some other really good examples of literature is Les Miserables by Victor Hugo, and it shows the struggle of individuals against society. He wrote a book, and they're making it into a movie. It's been made into a play. It'll also become a movie this past year, and it's all about this illiterate man in 19th century France in the revolutions of 1848 who was trying to find a way to survive. But perhaps the most influential of all Romantic literature is Mary Shelley's book, Frankenstein. And Frankenstein is anti-enlightenment. What that means is it's against the scientific movement of logic and reason. And you can see as an example of Frankenstein because he is somebody who's created by man from dead body parts. And it's a horror story because this monster, this zombie, pretty much chases his creator around the world and he can never die. And it has a lot of connection to today when you talk about Star Wars, for example. Darth Vader is a Frankenstein figure, a machine man, or Terminator, these machines that are coming to destroy the world. And that has a lot to do with the Industrial Revolution, which we'll get to later on. But these are romantic ideas where you have one man struggling against, and they're trying to fight against all these concepts, and it glorifies that hero. The other very famous romantic artist that you have to know is Ludwig van Beethoven. He celebrated heroism, and his most famous piece of art is called the Ode to Joy, and you probably have heard this tune. Da 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 da. It's a very famous piece of piano that a lot of people have played, and it celebrates the concept of somebody struggling against that. And it's supposed to evoke that emotion. Now, this is all tied to the Industrial Revolution. The Industrial Revolution, and here is a picture of the Industrial Revolution, was best defined as the increased production of machine-made goods. And you can see here a factory, and the factory's burning coal, and there's machines in here being run by the burning of that coal, probably making textiles. And after 1850, the Industrial Revolution really takes off, and artists kind of respond. They tend to be less romantic, and they try to show life as it was. For example, here's a very famous piece of realist art of these, it's called the Stonebreakers. And these workers, they're breaking up stones to make a road for these new products to travel on. It is very anti-romantic. It is against the loving of nature. It's trying to show life as it really was. And you can see this in the most famous piece of realist literature, A Christmas Carol. And it shows the despair of working life. Probably the most famous piece of realist literature. You have Ebenezer Scrooge, this guy who's consumed with making money during the Industrial Revolution. You have Tiny Tim, you have the ghost of Christmas past, present, and future. So there is some romantic feel to it with the supernatural, but it's mainly to show how bad life is because of the Industrial Revolution. They're trying to show life as it was as a way to get things to be better. But then all of a sudden a new invention comes along that's realist, and it is photography. And one of the very first photographers is named Louis Daguerre. He's from French, and he produces these really famous realist images. It actually discourages painters and writers from realism because you can actually capture life as it was. You don't need to paint it. You can just take a photograph of it. But photography becomes very popular during the late part of the 19th century, and most of you actually have cameras on your phone now. So we're all armed with cameras today. The next thing I'd like to talk about is Manet. Manet becomes the very first Impressionist artist. This is his most famous Impressionist piece of art, The Railroad. And what they're trying to do is give an impression of a subject or a moment in time. And you can see from this art that it's a woman and her daughter, and they're waiting for a train. The train is being suggested by the steam back there. And trying to show industrial life in just a quick moment in time. Very fleeting, and that's the concept they're trying to promote. Impressionists are influenced by Manet. They're trying to show a brief moment in time. And here's Claude Monet's very famous painting, The Water Lilies. And here's one brief moment in time of light on water. Impressionists love to play with light on water, and it depicts that light on the water. So very brief moment in time, and you have to take advantage of that time. The next person that talks about it, that's very famous Impressionist artist, is Degas. This is one of my favorite sculptures by him. It's an Impressionist sculpture of a ballet dancer. He's very famous for ballet dancers were his muse. And this is a dancer girl at the age of 14. It's called his Flower of the Gutter because if you get quite close, she's not very attractive. And she was a working class girl who was taking ballet. And the model who posed was actually one of 3 sisters, and her family struggled so much that unfortunately her mother actually put the sisters out as prostitutes at one point. And he chose this for a reason because he wanted to show the harshness of modern industrial life, and then he kind of juxtaposed that with a classical pose from ballet, which was the art form of King Louis XIV, the most famous king of France. So that is our lecture 17. Thanks. Bye.